right, good morning. I'm so glad that you're here. Aren't you glad the air conditioner works? Last week I turned the corner, every light in Dardanelle was off except for one, and it was at home church. I said, praise the Lord. So, hey, welcome to home church. If you're joining us online or you're here today, I'm glad you're here. But I do want to this is a PSA. I was just looking over here. Do you realize how hot it's going to be this week? Take care of yourselves. Take care of people you love. Think about that in advance. Drop some water off to someone or take them to Walmart and spend Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday there, because it's going to be 107 degrees here on Thursday. It is really, really hot. So take care of yourself. Start hydrating right now. So, hey, we're right in the middle of a series we call Backstage Pass. We're in week 4. We've been talking about a group of people who spent life with Jesus. And we call them the apostles, but Jesus, he just called them friends. Yeah, so I've been blessed to have a lot of friends in my life. I've heard it said that friendships are the best measure of a person's worth. Friends are the kind of people that when you invite to your house, you don't have to clean up before they come. Can I get an amen? I have a friend of mine, I'm looking for him right now. He bought me a t-shirt. It says, that's a terrible idea. What time do we start? Because friends are the kind of people that you don't have to tell. I'm looking over here right now at Andy Winchell. They're the kind of people you don't have to tell about the things that you did that you shouldn't have done because they were right there when you were doing it. Anybody got a friend like that? Yeah, I've been blessed to have a lot of friends. As I think about my life, I have 6 grades in elementary school, and I went to 6 different elementary schools. So every year I would get a chance to meet new friends, and then eventually I'd make a new best friend. And then the next year we'd go to another school, and I'd meet new people and make a new best friend. And then the next year I would go to another school and make another new best friend. And as an adult, my career has done similar things for me. I've moved all across the nation. And Rachel, she's moved all across the world. I think she's got friends on 3 continents, maybe. Definitely all over the United States. But in each of those places, I've been able to make friends. So today we're going to talk a little bit about friendships. I'm going to tell you a story today. It's actually my favorite story, and it's about a guy who went on a mission trip, and he made some friends. And I'm going to tell you the story, and I'm going to ask for a little what I call poetic liberty. Does anyone know what that means? Poetic storytelling? It means I want you to go home and read Acts chapter 15 and 16, and then not call me up and say, Aaron, he was not driving a Hyundai. Okay? So you go and you check the facts exactly, but I'll tell the story today. And the key character in my story is a man named Saul. Okay, so Saul was an Ivy League educated kind of guy. Saul's a fellow who got his PhD from the University of Tarsus. Saul was a fellow who was in the ruling elite of the day. Okay, he was the big guy at his fraternity house. Do you understand who Saul was? He was the kind, in today's language, he would have went to Harvard and then immediately just got an appointment to the U.S. Senate. That was the kind of guy that Saul was. Saul was the kind of fella that if you wanted to have a debate with Saul, you lost. Okay, Saul was the kind of person who he knew what he knew because he was really smart and he knew a lot. Saul was the kind of guy that you probably just didn't want to get into a debate with to start with. And when the Christian movement started, that went against everything that Saul had ever believed in his life, as well as the people who he hung out with. And they dedicated themselves to do something about it. Predominantly, they just wanted to stop it. And Saul began to dedicate all of his time to finding Christians so that he could hold them accountable. And here's what's important that we know about accountability back then. It looked a lot different than it does today. Accountability back then could be really, really, really bad. So we're going to catch up with Saul in the story right after the stoning of Stephen. So just a quick little blurb about Stephen. So Stephen was the first Christian martyr. And the story of Stephen, I love the story of Stephen. This is so bold. So Stephen is out and about, and he's telling people about Jesus, and he doesn't like the way that certain things are going, and instead of getting on Facebook and telling everybody about it, he just decided he was going to walk right up there to the Sanhedrin, which would be like going to the Senate. And he just walked right in the door, and he said, "You guys, you're telling everybody what to do, but you're not doing it. You're writing different rules, but you're not following it. You're going to church, but you're not living it." And you know what they did? They didn't like it. So they dealt with him with accountability of the day, which was immediate, which looked like they drug him out front right then and there and stoned him. And our key character from today, his name was Saul. Saul was there, and he approved. So that's where we catch up with Saul. What I like about this story I'm about to tell is that Saul was, you ever knew something was going to happen to somebody, but they didn't know it was going to happen to them, and it was fun to watch? You know, like, I heard too many laughs up here, like you playing tricks on somebody. Saul is about to have an encounter of his lifetime, but in this moment, he doesn't know it yet. So remember, they're pretty mad about this situation, about this Christianity thing. They just drugged this guy, Stephen, out front and stoned him to death for even mentioning it. So we're going to catch him in Acts 9, chapter 1. Meanwhile, Saul was still breathing. Think about it. When you breathe, it's constant. In and out, in and out. He is breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples. The Lord's disciples at the time were basically anybody who was a Christian. He went to the high priest, and he asked him for letters to the synagogues in Damascus. Now, what letters would be, would picture going, he walked in and said, "Will you deputize me? I'm going to go to Damascus, and anybody I find that did anything I don't like, I want to arrest them and drag them back here." And the high priest said, "Here are your letters. Have fun." So meanwhile, Saul is breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples. He went to the high priest, asked for letters to the synagogues in Damascus, so that if he found any there who belonged to the way. Now, the way is Christianity. It's the way to Jesus. It's the way to the Lord. They called it the way. Whether men or, ladies, look out. There's no hiding for you. Whether men or women, he might take them as prisoners to Jerusalem. How fired up was Paul about going and finding somebody? Damascus from Jerusalem was about 150 miles, and this guy was going to walk. Maybe he took a donkey, but the subway didn't exist, and they didn't have Hyundais. I've seen Rachel come across the house because I did something foolish, and she was pretty upset about it, but I don't know if she'd walk 150 miles in sandals to come talk to me. She said, "I don't know," for the record. That is what Paul was about to do. So in verse 3, we read, as he neared Damascus, so at this point he has either walked or took a donkey or rode in a wagon, 150 miles. He is ill as a hornet at this point, I would think. He's dirty, he's dusty, probably had a rock in his sandal. His deodorant wore off a long time ago. He's not in the best of moods. As he neared Damascus on his journey, suddenly, a light from heaven flashed around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice say to him, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" We need to watch when we see this. Who did he go to get? He went to go and get Christians. But when we persecute and treat other Christians poorly, Jesus sees that as persecution and treatment of him poorly. "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? Who are you, Lord?" Think about the moment that he's having right here. The person he has been persecuting because people are following someone he thought didn't exist just appeared in front of him. "I am Jesus, who you are persecuting." Saul has just run right into the very person he said didn't exist. He just went from Ivy League snob know-it-all, find everyone who said that and kill them too. I need to find everybody who doesn't know about it and let them know about Jesus. His life changed in a flash, literally. And let me tell you from personal experience, the day that you run into Jesus is the last day of the old you. That I can guarantee you. Saul never made it. And you can take note of this. I hope that you do. That this is the first point in my story where Saul headed off somewhere and didn't make it. That he had his first little failure. So Saul, who forever and ever will be known as Paul had his interaction with Jesus. He knew that Christianity was already spreading like wildfire in the local area. He had a bigger vision. He wanted to take Christianity, he wanted to tell the entire world about Jesus. So just like we go on mission trips to Guatemala to tell folks about Jesus, Paul went on mission trips as well. And we're going to talk a little bit about his second mission trip that he took with one of his colleagues, and his name was Silas. So they set out, and Paul's big vision was, I want to go all the way to Asia. Okay, like Damascus and Syria wasn't far enough. Like Missouri wasn't far enough. I'm going to walk to Mexico. I want to go all the way to Asia. So on the way, he's got Silas with him. This is hundreds of miles. And on the way, they encounter this kid named Timothy. So they run into Timothy, and Timothy likes what they're up to, and he joins their journey, and they get to that first place where they're going to preach. And you got to think, they're filthy. They are dirty. They're just out there walking in this dusty, deserty place. And when they get there, Paul walks out and says, hey, about this place, I just ran into the Spirit, and the Spirit said that we are not supposed to preach here. Can you imagine walking, your friend comes and says, hey, we got to go do this thing. It's hundreds of miles away. You walk, you talk, you dream, you have all these visions, and then when you get there, he walks out and says, oops, not here. Sorry about that. I imagine Timothy and Silas were pretty darned upset. So Paul said, but we do have a new place, and it's only a few hundred miles away, so let's get up and go. Aren't you excited about it? I'm sure that they probably maybe were not at that moment. So they get up and they go. And as they're headed towards destination number 2, they run into a man named Luke. And Luke was intrigued by the group. He thought, you know what? This is a pretty good group. I think I'll join in with them. So they get to destination number 2. And they're tired and they're exhausted, but they've been dreaming. And they've got great visions of what tomorrow will bring. We're going to preach to hundreds of people. I can't wait to get up tomorrow. And they get up the next day and they walk out, and there's Paul, and he says, come here, guys. I got incredible news for you. And they're like, yeah, baby. Am I going to be the first to preach? And Paul says, hey, yeah, about that, the Spirit came to me last night and said, not here either. Can you imagine in that moment your buddy has just rascaled you into one adventure and now number 2, and both times he's like, just kidding? It'd be like Lucy holding the football for Charlie Brown, like, I'm not going to try to kick it anymore. They were probably pretty upset. And they got up the next morning and they decided to go on their way to destination number 3. So they're headed towards destination number 3, and they run into a lady named Lydia. Now, I don't know why Lydia joined the group, because at this point, I'm sure there were lots of sour grapes about, and at this point, they're probably going to go somewhere and do nothing at the rate that they're producing, right? But she did all the same. So here's a freebie for you. The road to success, have you heard it said? It has many tempting parking spaces. So let's stop for a second in this story. What is happening here? Why would God do all these things to this guy named Saul and now Paul? He's walked into his world. He's totally wrecked it. He was a very successful guy, and he walked into his world and said, hey, everything that you just stood and convinced everybody of is not true. We want you to go this other direction and convince people about Jesus. And he did. And everything he's tried from that point forward has been a failure. He has set out for one destination after another and had absolute failure so far. So what if it was never really about the place, that he was going, the destination? What if, just maybe, it was about those people that he met along the way? Proverbs 16:3 says, commit to the Lord whatever you do, and he will establish your plans. So we're going to back this story up a little bit. That last person he met after his second disappointment, her name was Lydia. Here's what we learn about Lydia. Lydia dealt and was a dealer in indigo. And indigo is the item that makes purple, well, it makes purple purple. So if you were rich and you wanted a big purple robe, you know who you had to go talk to? Lydia. Lydia had money that helped to fuel Paul's adventures and his missions. And that second leg of the journey, after his first disappointment, he ran into this fellow named, do you remember his name? Luke. They ran into Luke along the way. This is the same Luke. This is the Luke that in weeks past you've heard me say Luke is my favorite gospel. Why do I love the gospel of Luke? I love the gospel of Luke because there was a man named Theophilus, and he's the guy that kept reading all the accounts of what was going on. He read one story that said, wow, God came to earth, and another one that said, wow, he was crucified, and another one that said, no, he rose again. And Theophilus is like, which one do I believe? There's so many conflicting stories. And he reached out to a doctor, to a scientist, a guy named Luke, and he said, would you, if I helped you, could you go out there and could you find out what the real story is? Not just hearsay. I need scientific evidence. Will you go out there and prove it to me? Would you figure it all out? That's the Luke that Paul, Timothy, and Silas have just run into. I love to go back to the Gospel of Luke. Here's how it opens. This is connecting some dots for Aaron that when it hit, I thought, wow. Here's what Paul says to us. He says, many have undertaken to draw up an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us, just as they were handed down to us by those who from the first were eyewitnesses and servants of the word. With this in mind, since I myself have carefully investigated. He didn't just sit at the house and scroll through Facebook to say, what's the newest news that's going on? He walked out the front door and said, I'm going to go out there and find out myself. And when he did, he ran into Paul, Silas, and Timothy. Do you think it was a coincidence? I do. It was just a coincidence. But here's the story. You know what the odds of a coincidence are when God's involved? 100%. Okay? It was 100% a coincidence that he ran into those guys. Paul's destination was a failure, but the people he met certainly weren't, and aren't we glad of that? I've heard it said that success and failure are on the same road. It's just success is a little bit farther down it. Don't stop. And after that first leg, that very first disappointment, if we back it up just a bit on that one, he ran into Timothy. Who's Timothy? Why does Timothy matter? Timothy, 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, these are books and letters that are in the Bible. He ran into this kid, and it turned out to be a lifelong relationship. In 1 Timothy, here's how Paul describes his relationship with this kid that he ran into. He says to Timothy, my true son in the faith. Paul's disappointment, and watch this because it could be yours too. Oftentimes, our disappointments turn into divine appointments when we just stop and we look around. But you know what didn't happen in all of this? Paul didn't just sit home and think that his friend circle was going to get bigger. Timothy did not just show up at Paul's house and say, hey, can we be lifelong friends? You know, knock, 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 knock. Would you like to buy some candles for the Cub Scouts? And oh, by the way, can we be lifelong friends? No, that is not what happened. Paul didn't expect it, but God had it all set up. Paul just had to move to go out and do it. Luke did not just show up at Paul's house and say, hey, you want to go make history together? No. Paul had to actually go out into the world before he ran into Luke. And Luke had to go out into the world before he ran into Paul. Paul had just had this big disappointment. Here's what he had to do. He had to put on his big boy pants. And he had to say, you know what? That happened, but I'm going to fail forward. I'm going to move forward. I'm going to keep going. And then look what happened. God had it all set up for him. We all know people right now who they had something bad happen to them, and they are just all holed up right now. They are not moving forward at all. And what we learned here is that we have to keep moving. Lydia didn't just show up at Paul's house and say, here's my credit card. Take my purse. Here, I'll fund anything you want. That's not how it happened. Paul had to have skin in the game. Paul had to invest in the game. We all know people right now who are praying for a harvest, and they have not planted a single thing. We read here in Proverbs 21, it says, the craving of a sluggard. The craving of a sluggard will be the death of him, because his hands refuse to work. Friendships require a bit of work. You have to go out there and you have to find them. And when it came to Paul's investment and Lydia's investment, here's what I would want you to know. You can try, but you cannot outgive God. I challenge you to. Now, I will not sit here in front of you publicly and preach the prosperity. This sounds like it's going out. I need to swap on this mic. So I'm not going to stand here and preach to you the prosperity gospel. But here's what I do want to challenge each and every one of you as I look through this room and out there. Come catch me afterwards. I will tell you amazing stories about what God has done in my personal life after I have been obedient to Him. It is real and it works. So I have often wondered, why did God send His Son to earth? Anyone here ever wondered that? And there's a lot of different reasons that you could say this is why God sent His Son to earth. But I believe that the reason He sent His Son to earth is to show you, to show me, to show us how we are supposed to live. And here's what He did. You know what the first thing He did when He came to earth was? He set up a small group. He jumped right into relationships because God wanted to have relationships with people, and God wanted to have a relationship with you. Our verse that we've been studying, Luke 6, says that one day soon afterward, Jesus went up on a mountain to pray, and He prayed to God all night. At daybreak, He called together all of His disciples. Because remember, there were thousands of people, and He called together and said, I'm going to thin this down just a little bit. There's a lot of people in this world that you could have relationships with. And what He's saying is, hey, maybe you can have a healthy relationship with a little bit of a smaller group. He chose 12 of them to be apostles, and here are their names: Simon, Andrew, James, John, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, Simon, Judas, and Judas, who later betrayed Him. Did you see what just happened? Jesus just set up a home group. He wants you to do life with other folks. Here at Home Church, do you know what we have? We have home groups. And I know that many of you right now are probably involved in a home group. I'm looking around at folks that probably might come to Wednesday night, hopefully. I'm looking at a man right here that comes to my Sunday men's group. If anybody needs a Sunday men's group, I have one 7:30. It's right here at the church. I'm looking at ladies that are probably involved in ladies' groups. Jesus knew that He was going to need a little help with all this work, and He knew that you were going to need help with the things that you do in your life. Even the Beatles knew it. They wrote a song called I Need a Little, what's it called? I get a little help from my friends. See, even the Beatles were in a home group, okay? If you're not in a group, I get it. You probably have a good reason why. I'll tell you the number one reason that I bet you're not in a home group is because you're too busy. Raise your hand if you're just, maybe you are in a home group, but you're also too busy. Raise your hand if you're just busy. Nobody's busy? Rachel, would you write their names down? Because I got some stuff at the house I need done right now. And I just watched Andy Winchell say he's not busy. So you got time this afternoon. We're all really busy, okay? Here's what we read in Ecclesiastes. It says, if the axe is dull and its edge unsharpened, more strength, more effort, more time, more work is needed. But skill will bring success. Where do we get that skill? Well, we get it from other people. Relationships can make your life easier. They're not harder. They'll make things easier. When he comes over this afternoon to help cut my grass, that makes my life easier, not harder. Yeah, it took me a little bit of investment to get it done, but I did. We read in Proverbs 27:17, it says, as iron sharpens iron. So if we go back and we think about that verse, it says, if the axe is dull, how do we get it sharpened? As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. So if you're busy and you want to get your life a little bit freed up, sounds counterintuitive, but get involved with some healthy relationships. Reason number 2 that you're probably not in a small group, and I've had this happen to me, is somebody let you down. Somebody did you wrong. Okay? The last group you were in, this happened. I used to have a lot of good friends, but then that happened, right? It's happened to all of us. And guess what? It happened to Jesus too. Thomas, one of his closest apostles, just turned out to be a doubter. Philip, he was skeptical. How about Judas Iscariot? Talk about a backstabbing fool. He sold him out after all he did. These things happened to Jesus too. What about Peter? We're going to talk about Peter, but let me tell you, Peter was the kind of guy that you got right on Facebook and try to find those settings that says, take a break for a while. High maintenance. Lots of energy, but a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs for sure. And what about Matthew? Holy. Everybody hated Matthew. Does anybody here know someone that no one else really likes that much? Come on. Oh, all right. Everybody. And who would go out and intentionally make them your friend? Everywhere you go, you'd walk in like, I'm here. And they're like, you're here with her. Like, you're just welcome to go out the back door, the same one you came in, because you're welcome, but they're not. Right? Here's what the folks said to Jesus. We read this in Luke. They said, why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners? And Jesus said, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I don't think Jesus was picking his friends based on what they could do for him. I think Jesus was picking his friends based on maybe what he could do for them. And I would say to you that you need a couple of different buckets of friends in your life. You need some friends in your life, like I got one right over here, that pour into you, that invest into you, that you can get great advice from. But then you've got another group of friends that more than likely you're sowing into them. You're helping them along the way. We need both of those groups of friends. And trust me, I know it's not easy. Rachel, bless her heart, would tell you that I have social anxieties. I will sign up for just about anything, okay? And then when it comes time for that thing to happen, good luck finding me. I'm hiding somewhere in the house. I got a cough. I got a cold. I stubbed my toe. Something's up. I can't go. And then she does like that, and I get there, and here's what I find 99% of the time once I get there. I have a good time. I run into people. I start making friends. Because here's what I figured out a long time ago. Watch this. You have yet to meet your next new best friend. You haven't met them yet. But they're out there. They're out there right now just waiting. I'm looking around the room right now at people who I would say are my best friends. And just 4 or 5 years ago, I didn't know any of them. and now I'm doing everyday life with them. I'm glad I got out and found them, and they got out and they found me. So why am I talking about this so much today? Because I think we can learn a lot from these original apostles and from what Jesus did and how he set it up originally, and how he wanted us to be in a small group, and how he wanted each and every one of you to have the friends in your life. I think too many of us right now are wasting our time dreaming about things. We're thinking about stuff tomorrow. We're dreaming about that next new car we're going to have, or that new business thing we're going to do. Or maybe it's that new video game that's coming out that we just simply have to buy. Or maybe we're preoccupied because we're thinking down the road, oh gosh, this next upcoming school year is going to be terrible. I'm a teacher. This is going to be awful. Or maybe you're a person like me that you can ruin your Sunday worried about what? Monday. Yeah. And I think there's just too many of us that are doing it. We're so worried about tomorrow that we lose focus on today. We're so worried about our stuff that we're losing focus on people. We're so worried about the destination that we're not having any fun at all on the journey. And I think that's a challenge for all of us to change. These men, they walked with Jesus for 3 years. They did life with Jesus for 3 years. They learned from him. They studied under him. They did all these things together. They formed a small group together. And what difference did it make? All the difference in the world. It completely 100% changed their lives, and because of it, they changed the entire world. It changed them forever, and I'm going to tell you, it could change you too. Some of you right now, today, are in search of a life change. Right now, you're trying to figure out, what am I supposed to do? Where does God want me? Why am I here? What's next for me? Jesus taught us how to figure out those questions. He said, get into a group, get healthy relationships with other people, and start walking it out with them, and they will help you figure that out. You can do it together, but it's going to be a challenge doing it by yourself. If you're a man here today and you're looking for a way to get connected, I want you to come talk to me.